deep in the heart of the forest, where the mountains rose high enough to touch the clouds, a little rabbit was peacefully trying to survive, leisurely nibbling on some berries from a bush. The tiny rabbit had no idea that something, or rather someone, was silently watching its every move. Standing at the edge of a cliff was a young boy with eyes full of delight and a burning hunger, licking his lips like a predator lying in wait. The boy, who bore the blood of dragons, leapt from the cliff's edge, his long tail flying out behind him. His arms were relaxed at his sides, but his sharp claws were ready for action. Like a dragon diving from the heavens, the dragon boy shot straight towards the small rabbit below. The rabbit sensed the presence of the large creature, but didn't have time to react before it was pinned firmly to the ground. It weakly begged not to be eaten. But the dragon boy didn't hesitate, declaring that once prey is caught, there is no escape. Opening his jaws wide, the dragon boy bit straight into its neck, killing the rabbit instantly before he began to devour its remains. In the middle of his meal, the dragon boy suddenly realized he was no longer alone. A large striped tiger was silently approaching, its steps slow but menacing. The two creatures stared each other down, neither willing to back down. The tiger growled, and the dragon boy hissed in response. With a nimble leap, the dragon boy tried to fly away, but he suddenly realized his movements had become sluggish. The dragon boy looked down and saw the tiger had latched onto him. The tiger's powerful jaws bit deep into his leg, causing him to thrash violently to escape the ferocious beast. But then, the dragon boy's energy suddenly gave out, and they both plummeted to the ground with a hard impact. The tiger quickly climbed on top of him, sinking its teeth into the dragon boy's flesh. In a desperate attempt, the dragon boy tried to push the tiger off, weakly pleading that if he was going to be eaten, to please kill him first. The striped tiger paused, looking down at the small dragon boy, a hint of compassion in its eyes. It seemed to realize that he was just a child. Relaxing its body, the tiger lay down on top of him, still pinning him down, but no longer aggressively. Just then, the tiger, now clearly a woman, leaned down and gently licked the dragon boy's face. The unexpected tenderness caused him to fall unconscious, as the sounds of a nearby stream and small animals echoed through the forest. When he awoke, the dragon boy found himself lying in a cave. The striped tiger had brought him to her den. The dragon boy tried to stand up, but realized the wound from the tiger's bite was still fresh and painful. Despite this, he still tried to quietly leave the cave, but suddenly, something grabbed his leg. The unexpected action startled him, and in a fit of anger, he whipped his tail across the tiger's face, glaring at her and calling her stupid for grabbing his injured leg. The tiger looked at him, stunned by his insolence. Then she pouted before pinning him to the ground again. However, the dragon boy showed no fear. He calmly explained that he was hungry. Seizing the moment, he slipped out of her grasp, knowing she had no intention of eating him. The tiger then spoke up, explaining that the reason she didn't eat him was because he was still too small. Hearing this, the dragon boy laughed, his eyes crinkling in a teasing smile, saying that she should feed him so he'd grow up faster. The tiger was baffled by the suggestion, but her confusion was met with a mischievous, defiant attitude from the little dragon boy. He grumbled that he couldn't hunt, nor could he fly far with his injury, and if this continued, he might starve to death. His complaints annoyed the striped tiger, but in the end, she did as he asked. She silently approached a young, hoofed animal, then pounced, swiftly catching her prey while the dragon boy stood on a cliff, his eyes gazing at the distant sky. His peace was quickly broken by the sound of a group of creatures approaching. He lowered his gaze and saw a pack of wolves closing in on him, their eyes gleaming with the intent to tear his dragon body apart. They remembered the rumors about the delicious taste of dragon flesh, how dragon blood could heal any wound, and how a dragon's heart could grant immortality. The dragon boy let out a huff, scornfully asking if they really believed such ridiculous rumors. But the wolves didn't answer, only creeping closer. He tried to explain that he already had a predator after him. As he spoke those words, the striped tiger's silhouette appeared. The wolves growled, but the tiger answered with a sharp hiss, declaring that the dragon boy was her prey. The tiger charged at the wolf pack, her strength sending one wolf flying, slamming the body of another into the ground, and sinking her teeth deep into the throat of a third. Her ferocity terrified the remaining wolves, leaving them frozen in fear. However, the dragon boy noticed another wolf slowly crawling down the edge of the cliff. This one was larger, with a prominent scar where an ear used to be. The tiger spun around, but couldn't react in time before the large wolf sank its teeth into her neck. She tried to strike with her claws, but the wolf's jaws held fast, digging even deeper into her flesh. The pain made the tiger dizzy and weak, her paws hanging limp in the air. The dragon boy watched the scene with a sigh, until the scarred wolf was suddenly yanked into the air by its tail. It snarled in rage, demanding to be let down. Its wish was granted, but not in the way it had hoped. The wolf's entire body was thrown into the deep chasm, vanishing in an instant. The sight sent the other wolves fleeing in terror. The dragon boy went to check on the tiger, whose body was now covered in dirt and bruises, her neck still bleeding. The tiger glared at him, but he just smirked and began to fly up, taunting that he could get away anytime he wanted, while she was in such a pathetic state. He said that if she could fly up to his level, she should go ahead and try. His words displeased her, but instead of getting angry, she lifted her head with a sarcastic smile. The dragon boy continued to tease her, saying that if there was anyone he'd willingly let eat him, it would definitely be her. A moment later, he was pulled down and pinned to the ground again, as she threatened to eat him for real this time. However, he wasn't afraid. Instead, he pressed his hand against the wound on her neck, causing her to stop short and lean back slightly. In that moment, the dragon boy slipped free, looking curiously at his hand, which was now stained with her blood. Seeing this, the tigress grew angry and called him utterly uncharming. In response, the dragon boy just laughed and agreed, saying that food shouldn't be considered charming, which surprised the tigress, who stared at him in amazement. Not long after, he returned to her, reminding her that he was still hungry, which only confused her more. The dragon boy asked her if there was anything more interesting to do than eat, and so the two began to walk together. The dragon boy asked the tigress about the prey she'd caught, but her silence meant it had probably gotten away. The sound of a babbling brook echoed through the forest, as a bear tried to sneak up on the young dragon boy. However, the bear quickly noticed the tigress's presence. The bear approached, but it seemed the dragon boy had known it was hiding all along. He just glanced at it, which made the bear lose its patience and turn away in frustration. The tigress looked down, where the dragon boy was drawing something in the dirt. She asked what it was, and he explained that it was a drawing of her. However, she didn't seem pleased with this. Seeing that, the dragon boy quickly changed the subject and asked about food. She didn't answer, and her silence proved that she still hadn't caught anything. He mocked her hunting skills, while also criticizing himself for getting caught by someone so terrible. He went on to speculate that the reason she had trouble hunting was probably because of her pale coloring, which made her easy for prey to spot. With his own body standing out against the scenery, the dragon boy bent over the river and tried to slap the water to catch a fish. However, the fish quickly darted past and leaped out of the water. But this time, the tigress managed to snatch it. He burst out laughing at the sight, and the two of them caught one more fish before enjoying their meal together. His attention, however, was soon distracted by the sound of nearby birds. The birds were whispering about him, wondering if he was the last of his kind. Their words angered him, and he grabbed a rock and threw it at them, scaring them away. Afterward, he turned back to the tigress and told her they should get going. She tried to ask about the other dragons, but he refused to answer, even when she persisted. Eventually, the two returned to the tigress's cave to sleep. However, as she watched him sleep, she couldn't help but fall silent in thought. In the middle of the night, she heard a faint noise, went outside, and found an owl perched nearby. The owl asked why she hadn't eaten the dragon boy yet. In response, she simply said it was because he was still too small. But the owl wasn't convinced. It told her she should give up this waiting game because dragons live for thousands of years, while tigers live for less than 20. The owl advised her to eat the dragon boy now, before it was too late. Hearing those words, the striped tigress returned to the cave, her eyes fixed on the dragon boy. She quietly shed her unnecessary layers to find the perfect spot, preparing to take a bite. Just as she was about to strike, the dragon boy suddenly burst out laughing, shattering the silence. He opened his eyes and revealed that he had been awake the whole time. He asked if she really thought he would sleep so carelessly next to a predator. She didn't answer, asking instead if it was true that he could live for that long. The question made him laugh, but his expression quickly turned serious. He asked her in return if she believed the things he said, even when he tried to act so lighthearted and cheerful. Then, without letting her answer, he mocked her for believing what other creatures said. But he also added that tigers didn't need to be smart, because all they needed to know was how to run and tear things apart without thinking. Those words made the tigress truly angry. Unable to control herself, she pinned him to the ground again. But this time she bit him for real, aiming right for his shoulder. His pain scream rang out as he yelled that she was an idiot. The dragon boy, despite the pain, still shot back a sarcastic remark, asking if all tigers only knew how to use force to make others submit. As soon as he finished speaking, he unleashed a powerful kick that sent the striped tigress flying, leaving her with a stunned expression. He started to walk away, wanting to get away from this place, away from this troublesome tigress. But just as he was about to leave, his tail was grabbed. He turned back and saw the tigress looking at him with desperate and guilty eyes. She confessed that she didn't know anything about dragons at all, which made him curious why she wanted to know so much. Instead of answering her question, he pressed down on his wound, took the blood, and smeared it on her face. "It doesn't matter," he said, "since you were just going to eat me anyway." Despite that, he suddenly pulled her closer, whispering in her ear that he was not a child. The tigress froze, trying to process this information, then suddenly wondered if he could be even younger. Her naive question made him narrow his eyes, his gaze filled with annoyance. From nearby, the owl had heard everything, flapping its wings and flying away while agreeing with the thought that this tigress really wasn't smart at all. It was another day in the forest, where hoofed beasts ran and leaped between the trees. The tigress hid in the shadows, then suddenly burst out and pounced on one of them. With a powerful bite to the neck, she easily took down her prey. The dragon boy flew down, and the two of them shared a meal from the animal's carcass. Afterward, they rested beside each other, and the dragon boy suddenly asked why she was looking at her own body like that. She explained it was to escape her own self-satisfaction, which made the dragon boy curious. He reached out his hand and gently stroked her fur. The unexpected action startled her, her eyes widening in surprise. She demanded he not touch her, her voice accompanied by a small growl. But the dragon boy wasn't worried at all, merely asking curiously why she was so anxious. Without stopping, he continued to grasp and gently stroke her soft fur. The action gradually made the striped tigress lose her strength, feeling weak and unable to refuse what he was doing. The tigress rolled onto her back, a sudden move that astonished the dragon boy. It seemed she really enjoyed being petted, something he hadn't expected. But the moment was quickly interrupted by the sound of someone approaching. It was another tiger! The two tigers began to growl at each other, their eyes filled with an unconcealed challenge. Meanwhile, the dragon boy tore a piece of meat from the nearby carcass and flew up high to watch the confrontation. The tigress tried to assert ownership of her territory, but the newcomer wanted to challenge it. The two of them lunged at each other, claws clashing violently. The white tigress quickly gained the upper hand, swatting her opponent across the face before pinning the other tiger to the ground and biting down hard on its throat. Finally, the male tiger cried out, begging for his life, admitting that he had lost and didn't need to be killed. Instantly, the tigress released her jaws, letting her opponent get up. He then turned to face her to regain his dignified posture. The male tiger, after acknowledging his respect for the tigress's strength, casually declared that the two of them should become mates. The blunt proposal left the young dragon boy frozen, completely confused about what was happening. Ignoring the boy's confusion, the male tiger continued. Assuming that the tigress wanted cubs and didn't have a litter yet, the tigress only responded with a soft grunt, thinking for a moment. At this point, the dragon boy couldn't take it anymore. He flew down, reminding the male tiger that the tigress was, in a way, raising him. But instead of hesitating, the male tiger jumped up excitedly, declaring that the dragon boy could be food for their children. The dragon boy's face instantly changed, his eyes filled with rage. He explained bluntly that if the tigress wanted to choose a mate, that person had to be stronger than her. The tigress agreed, saying that was precisely her criteria. Hearing this, the male tiger fell into deep thought, then decided he would train to prove himself worthy. However, the dragon boy didn't want to see him ever again. Watching the male tiger's retreating figure, the dragon boy sighed, while the striped tigress lay relaxing on a rock. When the dragon scolded her for not thinking things through, she calmly replied that she had, then admitted her desire to leave behind many descendants so she could continue to exist even after death. Her answer made the dragon fall silent, staring at her, before letting out a sharp breath and complaining that all tigers were like that. This surprised her when he suddenly admitted that he didn't want his bloodline to continue, that he himself would be the end of it. She curiously asked if he hated dragons, but his answer surprised her even more. He said he didn't hate dragons, but hated himself for being born a dragon. Her curiosity grew, but when she tried to ask more, he became defiant like a child and refused to say anything else. The dragon boy also mentioned that he found it strange how his species always had an intense desire to mate. The tigress explained that it was necessary for the sake of family. Hearing this, the dragon boy threw aside the bone he was chewing, grabbed her, and said her main priority should be to eat him. They both fell to the ground, but he immediately flew up, leaving the tigress on the ground with an annoyed expression. He flew in circles, wondering what he had left unfinished while he was caressing her earlier. A while later, the tigress was seen sleeping peacefully, while he sat beside her. However, his once satisfied face gradually grew somber, his gaze lowering to stare sadly at the ground. Suddenly, from within an egg, a tiny creature cracked the shell and crawled out, welcomed by a larger dragon. The large dragon gently scratched the small creature's head, making the baby dragon smile with delight, enjoying the pleasant sensation of the first affectionate gesture, seemingly from its parent. The adult dragon bent down, opened its mouth wide, and then bit down on the baby dragon's head, as if it were food. Blood flowed from the wound on its neck, creating a horrifying nightmare that jolted the dragon boy awake. He coughed violently, clutching his throat and clawing at the ground in a panic before calming himself down. His eyes swept over the soundly sleeping tigress, her peaceful face a stark contrast to his own turmoil. Unable to shake his anxiety, he stepped out into the rain, letting out a small complaint about the weather before flying away. While soaring through the sky, he heard the chirping of baby birds in a nest, the faint sounds of helpless chicks calling for their mother. He snatched a weak fledgling and held it dangling over his mouth, preparing to devour it. But his action suddenly stopped. He thought for a moment, the image of his recent nightmare flashing through his mind. In the end, he decided to find food elsewhere, especially after having such a frightening dream. The dragon boy had no luck, as it seemed every animal around had some kind of family connection. This made him wearily sit down on a rock, his eyes looking up at the gloomy, pensive sky. Meanwhile, the tigress woke up drowsily and turned to her side, only to realize the boy was gone. His absence made her jump to her feet, stepping out into the rain, slowly waking up and disturbed by the thought that he might have abandoned her. Even though he had always acted strangely, the thought still made her grit her teeth, determined to run and find him. She dashed through the forest, splashing through puddles and searching around every tree for a clue, despite the relentless rain. Finally, she heard the hiss of a nearby weasel. The tigress tried to ask the weasel if it had seen the dragon boy, but it just kept growling, as if protecting its family. She stood there, wearily listening to its growls, then explained that she had no intention of attacking. The weasel seemed to calm down, then pointed the way, giving her a path to continue her search. The tigress found the dragon boy on top of a mountain. She walked over with a pouting face, scolding him for leaving without a word. But seeing the hint of sadness in his eyes made her soften. The young dragon flew down, teasing her for not paying attention to her prey, but she just gave him a gentle nip before turning away, leading him back without another word. The young dragon felt annoyed by her silence, especially since he could move on his own. But she continued back to the cave, shaking her body to get the raindrops off her fur. Before he could react, the tigress pulled him close to warm him up from the cold weather, and he decided not to refuse. He leaned against her soft fur while she licked her paws clean. The young dragon admitted to his nightmare, saying he dreamt he was eaten by a dragon. The tigress tried to comfort him, until he explained that it wasn't baseless. He said that for some dragons, newborn hatchlings are considered nothing more than food. The tigress couldn't believe it, but the young dragon clutched her fur, saying this very behavior was why there weren't many dragons left. She began to groom him, despite his complaints, explaining that tigers would be very happy if someone did the same for them. But the young dragon reminded her that, obviously, he wasn't a tiger. She leaned closer to him, asking what she should do next, which flustered him. He turned his face away and replied that she should just keep warming him up. The tigress leaned down closer and lay over the young dragon, enveloping his body with her warmth, but it seemed someone was watching them from a distance. A large bird soared through the sky, then landed on a mountaintop where a dragon was perched. A sinister smile spread across his face. The white tigress was stretching her body while standing in the river's current, when she suddenly noticed someone running towards her, splashing water everywhere. A male tiger charged forward, cheerfully greeting her and asking if she had eaten the dragon like she'd said she would. But without waiting for an answer, he moved closer, nuzzling his face against her. The white tigress froze for a moment, then slowly turned towards the male tiger as he licked her fur. He took a small step back after the intimate gesture. The male tiger lowered his body, trembling, preparing to pounce on the tigress. But just then, a dragon's tail swept into the scene, interrupting the situation. The young dragon's tail wrapped around the male tiger's neck, pulling him away from the tigress. Then he glared angrily at him and asked what they were doing. The male tiger, clutching his neck, seemed a little disappointed to see the young dragon was still alive. He explained that he was just playing with the white tigress. But the young dragon wasn't satisfied with that answer. He placed an arm protectively in front of the tigress, threatening the male tiger to stay away if he didn't have a good reason to be there. This made the male tiger pause, think for a moment, then awkwardly rub the back of his neck. Suddenly, he remembered something he wanted to tell the young dragon. With that, the male tiger said there were rumors of another dragon in the area, causing the young dragon's eyes to widen. The tiger continued to explain, saying the dragon was female and that all this information came from migratory birds. Although the young dragon seemed to scorn the birds as a source of information, he still looked very worried hearing those words. The male tiger went on, admitting that it wasn't a reliable source, especially since he himself had never met this dragon. However, he said this dragon had 4 horns on its head and 4 whiskers. The young dragon was even more stunned, already picturing what that dragon looked like in his mind. He immediately asked the male tiger where that dragon was. He said this dragon was spotted in the southeastern region. Instantly, the young dragon grabbed the tigress's wrist and said they needed to run away immediately. The tigress wondered for a moment where they would run to, but the young dragon didn't care about the destination, as long as it was far away from where they were. The white tigress refused, arguing that leaving her territory was dangerous. However, the young dragon believed it would be even more dangerous if they stayed here. Just then, the male tiger intervened. Confused by the young dragon's cranky attitude, he suggested the young dragon could have children with the other female dragon. But the young dragon immediately got angry and retorted, saying that such a suggestion would change the number of prey available to the tigers. The male tiger paused, watching the young dragon try to pull the tigress away, but then he suddenly had an idea and stopped them. He insisted that he wanted the white tigress to stay here. The young dragon, filled with confusion and anger, questioned him. The male tiger continued, saying that the white tigress would soon be his mate. The young dragon tried to ask about mating with other tigers. However, the male tiger refused, saying he would find someone else if he wanted, but he specifically wanted the white tigress because of her strength and because he thought she was very beautiful. This compliment surprised the tigress, leaving her speechless. Meanwhile, the young dragon bowed his head, pausing for a moment to think. Then he flew to one side and said that he and the male tiger would compete. Whoever reached the top of the distant high rock first would be the winner. The male tiger was confused, not understanding why they couldn't just fight, but the young dragon explained that he didn't want to get hurt, causing the male tiger to snort in derision. The male tiger told the young dragon that there would be no point in the competition if he used his ability to fly, making the young dragon sigh dramatically, then land on the ground, saying he wouldn't cheat as he stared straight ahead. The young dragon told the male tiger that if he lost, the male tiger could do as he pleased. But if he won, the male tiger had to give up having the white tigress as his mate. The male tiger broke into a confident smile, feeling as if he couldn't lose. The white tigress watched from a distance as the competition began. The male tiger quickly got bored and flew into the air, swinging his arms to his sides, giggling and glancing down at the ground while trying to ask the young dragon if his skills were overwhelming. However, that moment of smugness quickly turned to confusion when the male tiger realized the young dragon had disappeared, along with the white tigress. A scream echoed from the distance as the young dragon tried to get through the forest, with the white tigress feeling annoyed that he had run away from the fight again. The young dragon admitted that he never intended to compete in the first place. The tigress stopped, getting his attention, and called him selfish while gritting her teeth. He felt insulted by her words, while the male tiger tried to scold him for breaking the rules of his own match. However, the young dragon reminded her that this was never his original plan. The tigress concluded that he was a liar. The young dragon paused for a moment, leaving a few light scratches on a tree as a sign of suppressed anger, saying he didn't care, and told the tigress she still had the choice to stay with the male tiger. The young dragon put the male tiger out of his mind, and though he had passed up on a confrontation, he wasn't finished with his lecture yet. He continued to pull the tigress closer with his tail, explaining that victory isn't necessarily based on strength, and that he, a dragon, was not like the muscle-headed tigers. Although the young dragon tried to say a few more words, but right then, the white tigress bit down on his tail, growling angrily and holding it tight. They both sensed something rustling near them. They looked around in confusion, until the tigress suddenly felt a sharp pain. She leapt back, hissing in pain, when she discovered a deep wound on her leg. The tigress continued to growl, but neither of them knew where the strange creature was. The tigress didn't see the giant snake that suddenly burst out of the bushes and snatched the young dragon into its jaws. The snake was too fast, weaving around the rocks as it slithered away, and the white tigress hurriedly gave chase. Finally, she stopped at the edge of a waterfall. Meanwhile, the giant snake had managed to hide itself, coiling its long, scaly body around the young dragon. The boy seemed to recognize the creature. It called him Hekidu as it greeted him, while the waterfall roared in the distance. The snake wondered if the boy had gotten bigger, but Hekidu struggled and demanded to be released. As expected, the snake refused and knew that he would try to run away. Hekido didn't hide it and admitted that he wanted to do just that. The snake chuckled, drawing closer, opening its mouth wide as it prepared to explain something to Hekido, until the white tigress finally realized the situation. The tigress tried to crawl forward menacingly, but in the end, she felt herself weakening, staggering with every step. The wound the tigress had received earlier was finally taking its toll. Hekido was surprised to realize that the tigress was being harmed by poison. She trembled and looked up at the dragon boy with a desperate expression, surprising Hekido even more as he watched her collapse to the ground, unconscious. The snake, pleased with this turn of events, asked if the boy wanted to start eating the white tigress. However, Hekido wanted no part of that. Quickly slipping out of the snake's grasp and slamming its face into the ground, Hekido stood firmly on the snake's body, demanding to know if there was a way to cure the tigress. However, the snake dodged the question by answering its own previous one, confirming that the boy had grown since they last met. Hekido insisted on an answer, causing the snake to snort curiously at his behavior, wondering why he would want to help someone who had intended to eat him. The snake pretended not to know the source of the tigress's condition, causing Hekido to growl and say that the snake was the one who should be answering that question. The snake fell silent for a moment before telling the boy that there was nothing that could be done once someone was in the white tigress's state. Hekido raised his head, looking toward the tigress. Hekido immediately moved towards the tigress's unconscious body, while the snake wondered why the boy was so attached to her. However, Hekido didn't answer right away, only taking the tigress's hand and telling the snake that it should help him, since the snake had already noticed his obvious feelings. The snake stared at the boy for a moment before finally speaking, saying that there might be one single way to help the tigress. After turning around, the snake told Hekido that his blood was the answer. However, Hekido didn't believe this answer, thinking it was just a rumor. The snake recalled the first time it had caught the dragon boy, and noticed that its venom had no effect when it bit Hekido. No matter how many times it tried, the snake couldn't inject its venom into the boy. Hekido seemed completely unaffected the entire time. The dragon boy narrowed his eyes at the story, still not believing the snake's words, as it said that dragon blood seemed to have the ability to resist its toxins. Still, Hekido hesitated, but the snake seemed hopeful after making a suggestion. The dragon boy scoffed at the suggestion, then bit his own hand, surprising the snake that Hekido would actually do it. Hekido knelt down close to the white tigress and tried to position his hand to drip blood into her mouth, but it wasn't very effective. This made Hekido move in closer with a new strategy in mind. After taking a mouthful of his own blood, Hekido took the tigress's face in his hands and pressed his lips to hers to transfer a large amount of blood. The white tigress seemed to gasp as she felt the liquid in her mouth, and when she was told to swallow, she hesitantly did so. Hekido felt she needed more blood, so he continued the same action. Meanwhile, the snake lay in the water, watching with curiosity. Hekido repeated the action again, and then again until the bleeding stopped, feeling that he had given her enough. The snake allowed Hekido to move away from the white tigress, and said that she would wake up soon if its theory was correct, though there was no guarantee as to when that would happen. A howl echoed from the distance, making them both realize that evening had come. The young boy worried about the potential dangers. However, the snake reassured him that every creature in the area knew of its presence and wouldn't dare enter this territory so easily. Hekido turned back to look outside, despite the snake's words. This made the snake glance at the white tigress and tease Hekido about his strong attachment, as he was willing to harm himself just to protect her. Hekido decided to fly off, leaving the snake to wonder where he was going, and if Hekido was sure he wanted to leave the tigress with it. Hekido turned back and glared at the snake, threatening to harm it if anything happened to the white tigress, then flew off. The snake chuckled to itself, thinking how the boy hadn't changed one bit. As time passed, the white tigress continued to lie on the ground until she felt something touch her stomach, which startled her and slowly brought her back to consciousness. When the tigress opened her eyes, she was met with the gaze of the snake, which surprised her. She immediately took action and demanded to know where Hekido was. The snake gave a sinister grin and pretended to have eaten the young dragon, causing the white tigress to panic. She looked down, her face filled with despair. This sight amused the snake, which began to tease her. However, a newfound anger rose within the tigress, making her want to lunge forward and bite into the snake's body. That frantic action made the snake call for her attention, admitting it was just a joke. The snake's words had an immediate effect, causing the tigress to stop and back away. The snake sniffed at the wound, grimaced, and told the tigress that it had raised the young dragon. This surprised the white tigress. Hekido had been found when he was very young, and the snake felt it would be a waste to swallow the little dragon in one go, as it preferred to savor its meals. The white tigress listened with a displeased expression, which the snake noticed. The snake lowered its head and licked the side of the tigress's face, feeling as if their minds were on equal footing. However, the tigress just turned her eyes to the side, looking slightly embarrassed, and did not respond. Nearby, outside the cave, a crane was looking for fish to eat in the water before flying off. The snake told the tigress that Hekido would surely boast about the situation, as he often did, simply because he was a dragon, while rubbing its hand over the healing wound from her bite. The tigress felt frustrated that she could never tell what the boy was thinking. The snake whispered and suggested she watch Hekido's tail. The great snake used its own tail to demonstrate, explaining that Hekido would sway his tail slowly in a natural way, while he would whip it up and down when he was angry or trying to be intimidating. The snake began to ponder how to explain what happened when the boy was happy or joyful, but the moment was interrupted by falling boar carcasses. Hekido rushed past the snake, grabbed the tigress, and pulled her close, then turned back without a word, pretending to be indifferent, as he told the tigress to hurry up if she could move. Both the tigress and the snake looked at Hekido's tail, which was coiled in an unusual way. The tigress turned to the snake, who simply smiled with amusement. Hekidu wanted to insist that the tigress should hurry. However, it seemed Hekidu was exhausted as he collapsed to the ground. The tigress told him to rest, but he refused until the snake agreed and told him that, in his state, he certainly couldn't get out of this place. Hekidu pouted, full of anger and annoyance. As the night wore on, the boy lay on the ground, while the snake confessed that it had wondered where he was, but then concluded as much from the animal carcasses he had hunted. The tigress watched the snake swallow the animal carcasses whole, satisfied with the food Hekidu brought back. A certain name caught the tigress's attention, and the snake tried to explain that the name was only given because of how precious the boy was. But in the end, it still meant that the snake had named his food. The snake insisted that the name was necessary to convince the boy he wouldn't be eaten, otherwise he would have surely run away long ago. However, this plan was discovered at some point. The curiosity slowly shifted towards the tigress, as the snake wondered why she was so attached to Hekidu, to the point of risking her own life. The tigress glanced at the boy and noticed the scars on his wrists, which made her expression darken. She admitted that she never knew what he was thinking. The tigress asked why their kind ate each other, and the answer came immediately. The snake explained that dragons were conceited. They looked down on all creatures and mocked those who lived on the ground. Everyone gradually grew tired of the dragon's behavior, which led to the birds spreading lies about how eating a dragon's heart would make one immortal. This caused the dragons to be killed off one by one, but it seemed the rumors didn't even matter, as dragon meat, while dangerous, was still delicious. The dragons avoided landing on the ground and began to eat each other. This unfortunate situation led to no more dragon children being born, and combined with their pride, it made them never want to live together again. This meant that the dragon species was now extinct, at least according to the story. The snake didn't feel too sorry for the species. Hekidu seemed to stir and sweat in his sleep, a sign of another nightmare that the tigress noticed. She quickly lay down beside him, as this had helped him when he opened his eyes last time. Deciding to bury her head in his side, they both fell back asleep. Eventually, Hekidu recovered and was able to fly with ease again. The snake told the tigress to keep his tail a secret, but the boy looked over and felt annoyed. Grabbing the tigress's hand and telling the snake not to fill her head with nonsense, a smile flashed from afar. As the tigress was lifted higher, able to see the dawn light up the land below, the tigress stared in awe before they both landed on the ground in the forest, letting Hekidu boast about how tigers could never do something like that. The tigress noticed the dragon boy's tail was curled, a sign that he was happy, which made her feel pleased before they both set off. It seemed the dragon mentioned in the rumors was moving through the lands, guided by the birds. Finally, it landed at the snake's den. The giant snake peeked its head out of the cave, catching the female dragon's attention as she entered, and was seen as a strange guest. An unhappy look appeared on the dragoness's face as she mentioned hearing there was a dragon in the area, then asked the snake where Hekidu was. A memory of the boy's instructions on which direction they were heading surfaced in the snake's mind, making it chuckle, then tell the truth, though it was unclear if its words would be believed. The dragon immediately assumed it was a lie because it came from a snake. This made the snake curious about the question, and the dragoness admitted that she had tried to eat the snake before. This response made the snake immediately rush out and dive into the water, leaving the dragoness to hover over the water's surface. Before the snake could strike and bite the girl's neck, it tried to coil around her to paralyze her. Although the snake was experienced in attacking dragons, the dragon girl used the claw at the end of her tail to stab the snake's head, creating an opening for her to slam its head hard against the ground. Blood poured from the snake's body, and a memory suddenly flashed through its mind. It remembered when Hekido had gotten greedy with its food before being lightly swatted away. The dragon growled and hissed more fiercely, prompting the snake to say that such behavior would get him nowhere in this world, and that it was better to use strength, especially when trying to steal her food. Hekido pouted and tried to bite the snake's tail, which made the snake smile in satisfaction, realizing his actions were having no effect. The snake's decapitated corpse was left on the ground, while the dragon girl bathed in the water, surveying the area and feeling like she wanted to settle down here. After killing the snake, she turned to ask the two birds for their opinion, and they agreed, calling her Master Shinsue. The girl, panting, looked ahead, hoping to see Hekido again, as if she wanted to reunite with him, as survivors of their kind, just as they had done before. This desire was encouraged, and the two birds were tasked with finding the dragon boy. Once again, as Hekido and the white tigress moved through a bamboo forest, they stopped by a cliff. The boy gazed into the distance while what appeared to be a female panther moved across the land, a weak little fox cub dangling from her mouth. A male panther was trotting after the female, causing her to open her mouth wider, letting the fox cub fall to the ground and roll away. The fox cub trembled and looked up at the female panther, crying out with a weak gaze, calling her mother. The female panther growled and swiped her claws at the male, pulling the cub closer to protect it. This sight left the male panther completely bewildered, and he asked the female why she was protecting a fox. The female panther, being a panther, didn't hesitate, insisting that the fox was her child. This only enraged the male panther further, and he decided to kill the fox cub. He lunged, trying to bite the fox, but the female panther blocked him, his fangs sinking into her neck. The little fox cub stood there, watching the scene anxiously. The male panther was stunned to see a white tigress charging toward them. He leapt back and demanded the tigress leave, confused as to why she was getting in his way. But the white tigress simply replied that she didn't like what was happening. Their roars led to a fight between the two animals. They both lunged at each other, claws flashing, and then the white tigress bit into the male panther's leg, dragging him away. She tried to slash at the male panther's neck but missed. However, The white tigress's move gave the male panther a chance to jump away and let out an angry hiss, but he just glanced over at the mother panther and the fox cub, then decided to charge toward them. He quickly snatched the fox cub, causing it to cry out in surprise and fear. The male panther was about to run off with the cub when a tail suddenly whipped across his face, making him stagger. The fox cub fell into Hekidu's arms, while the male panther was slammed to the ground by the white tigress's weight. The two of them warned the male leopard, threatening to tear off his limbs or strangle him to death. In the end, the male leopard had no choice but to reluctantly walk away, while Hekido and the white tiger watched him retreat into the distance. Hekido told the tigress not to interfere in every little conflict, but she was surprised to see him getting involved in them too. He immediately shot back, saying he only stepped in when she was the one who started it. However, their childish argument was cut short by the happy yelps of the fox cub, as it saw its mother approaching after having rested for a while. The mother leopard and the fox cub were sharing an affectionate moment before they noticed Hekido and the white tiger watching them. The female leopard asked if the tigress found this strange, and the tigress, while watching the fox cub run to her, replied sadly. Silence filled the air for a moment, before the female leopard confessed that the male from earlier was the one who had killed her cubs. This left the dragon boy confused, hearing that being the same species meant nothing, especially since her cubs weren't his, and this male wanted to have his own, willing to eliminate anyone who stood in his way. After grieving the loss of her cubs, the female leopard had eventually stumbled upon the fox cub, curled up beside its dead mother. The sight made the leopard feel as if she couldn't just leave the little cub behind. Hekidu, seeing the situation, spoke up about their different species, ignoring the fact that he was in a similar situation himself. The female leopard agreed that it was unnatural, but she didn't care at the moment because she knew the fox cub needed her. And she played with the little one before turning to ask if they were together, despite being different species. When night fell, the female leopard slept in a tree, holding the fox cub in her arms. However, it seemed the male leopard was lurking on a nearby cliff, ready to strike and take them by surprise. The male leopard's plan was interrupted when the white tiger and Hekidu appeared right behind him. Having known he would return, they repeated their warning, causing him to roar and try to flee. But after being pinned to the ground, the dragon and the tiger attacked him just as they had promised. Afterward, the two of them rested nearby. The white tiger began to groom herself, cleaning the blood from her fur. When she noticed Hekido staring off into the distance, she crept closer to nuzzle against him affectionately. But he noticed a bit of blood still on her shoulder. He paused for a moment, then tried to lick the blood away. She looked at him in confusion, then raised a paw to caress his face. However, Hekidu gently bit her paw, causing her to snatch it back in surprise. Hekidu chuckled and told the tigress they should find a way to extend her lifespan. But the tigress was confused, not knowing what she would do if she lived longer than expected. This confused Hekidu as well, and he said that a basic reason for doing so was simply to not die. The tigress fell silent, her gaze lowered, until Hekidu drew closer, smirked, and told her she didn't need to think about difficult things, especially a tiger like her. Crossing the frigid mountains, Hekidu lay on the tigress's back as she trudged through the snow. Finally, it seemed the tigress had found a place for them to take shelter. She dug through the snow and dirt to widen the space, then crawled inside and set the boy down. The white tiger was about to leave when Hekidu grabbed her tail and asked where she was going. She simply replied that she was going to find food. Whether it was because he didn't want to be away from her, or because he remembered the trouble she'd had with it when they first met, Hekidu reluctantly let go and told her to catch something small. As she walked through the snowy forest, the woman looked at her pale body and remembered how as a child, she had wondered why her color was different from the other tigers. Someone had told her it was because her body needed to blend in perfectly with the snow. That person in her memory had asked if Hakude understood the reason. Eventually, the woman spotted a herd of cattle and stealthily crept closer, but the faint sound of her footsteps in the snow drew their attention. With no other sounds and the animals sensing no distant danger, they returned to their grazing. Hakude recalled what she had been taught and realized she didn't need to chase her prey. Instead, it was better to wait patiently. After silently following the herd, she charged in and caught a cow, killing it as she tried to drag it back. The white tiger panted and continued on her way. However, the scent of blood seemed to have attracted the attention of a starving bear, which charged towards the tiger, trying to attack her. Its claws tore at her side as Hakude growled, slowly backing away as she remembered there was no need to fight back against a hungry bear, as they have no regard for their own safety. She let the bear take the cow, walking away while trying not to lick her wounds to avoid making them worse. But Hakude found a river. She noticed a crane standing in the water, and lunged at it as the bird tried to fly away. She managed to catch the bird, despite falling into the water. Meanwhile, Hekidu was trying to keep warm in the den, his tail wrapped around his body. He saw Hakude return with the dead crane. But Hekidu didn't seem grateful, instead complaining about how long she'd taken. Hekidu demanded that she come and warm him up. But angered by his attitude, she turned her back and tore into the dead crane by herself, growling in annoyance. Hakude was suddenly reminded of a memory, when she was scolded for trying to fight back when another tiger cub hit her. She had been told not to let her emotions get the best of her, but to pay attention to her surroundings. With that in mind, her gaze fell upon Hekidu, who was genuinely shivering, prompting her to wrap her body around him. Hekidu lifted his head, leaning against her body. They lay like that through the night before Hekidu noticed the wounds on her side. This prompted him to reach over and press his finger into the wound. She flinched slightly, and Hekidu let out a small laugh. But Hakude was fed up with his attitude and didn't want to be the bigger person this time. so she kicked him away, shoving him out into the cold. Hekidu shivered once more and tried to press himself against her for warmth, but Hakude rejected him with a cold glare. Hekidu continued to complain about having to leave for her sake, all while begging her because he was freezing cold. As they traveled through the lands, various animals shared their opinions and wisdom. A leprous creature said that if one is a skilled hunter, they'll have no trouble finding food, and that is what grants a long life. An animal that lived in a hole in the ground advised that this was an easy way to ensure a long life. As they found a safe place to hide and sleep, a bird explained that survival is guaranteed, as long as one is swift enough to escape enemies when they approach. When they approached a bear, it demanded to be fed dragon meat before it would offer any advice. Hekidu, frustrated by that answer, growled as he chased after the animal, but the boy immediately regretted his actions, as he felt the cold and ran back to lean on Hakude for her warmth. Frustrated that the peace and quiet he'd hoped for was nowhere to be found, they stumbled upon a group of monkeys who joyfully welcomed them at the sight of a dragon. They offered to give their advice for free, which surprised Hekidu a little, though he couldn't help but be pleased by their enthusiasm. The monkey, who appeared to be the leader of the troop, seemed puzzled when asked how to live longer. The monkey leader figured that dragons already live long enough, but the question was clarified to be about the tiger. Even so, the monkey still believed it was impossible to change a predetermined lifespan, which made Hekidu sigh in disappointment. Since he already knew that and was hoping for a different way, a look of regret appeared on the monkey's face, as other members of its troop came forward to offer them a drink. The leader explained that the drink was made from fruit, and that it warmed the body and gave it energy, along with some dried meat, since they were carnivores. The monkey also offered them a place to rest for the night. It was a place where they could lie down on some straw and ox fur. But Hekidu was hesitant about this excessive kindness until he saw Hakude drink the fruit juice without a care. Hekidu gently cautioned her, even as she seemed to be enjoying its delicious flavor. Just then, the monkey drank from its own cup, reassuring him that it wasn't poisoned. The dragon boy took a sip and was puzzled by the taste, until the monkey returned to the topic at hand, asking if the boy knew the rumors about a dragon's heart. The monkey leader explained that a monkey had once eaten a dragon's heart and died within just 2 days. But then, a wolf ate that monkey and suffered the same fate. So, it's possible a dragon's heart contains some kind of toxin. Hekidu was confused by this theory. But after a moment's thought, he concluded that a dragon's heart definitely didn't grant immortality. As Hekidu rested in the space they'd been offered, he turned to look at the woman and began to blush, panting to himself as he felt his body heating up. He felt incredibly hot, but his attention was captured when Hakude suddenly appeared on top of him. Hekidu was confused by this, looking at her as she admitted she wanted something from him before she moved closer, leaving no trace on his body. Hekidu grew even more frustrated and confused as Hakude glanced at her own lips and explained that she wanted his heart, her claws digging deep into his chest and drawing blood. Suddenly, Hekidu woke up from the pain, realized that a dragon was looming over him, while the monkey from before was sitting on him. He realized his limbs were bound tight, and he struggled against the restraints, as the monkey stabbed at his chest again, causing Hekidu to flinch and thrash around in anger. The posts he was tied to were damaged, but they held firm against his strength. He tried to throw the monkey off with a snap of his jaws, but was forced to stop as the rope tightened around his neck. Defeated, he stopped struggling and collapsed to the ground. Hekidu tried to look for Hakude, but the monkey noticed and explained that she wasn't here, and was probably having a pleasant dream. The monkey hummed, holding its dagger, wondering whether a dragon's toxins were present in its body naturally, or only produced after death. This made it wonder what would happen if it ate the heart of a living dragon, and it stabbed at Hekidu's chest once more. But at that very moment, a bird swooped down from the sky and kicked the monkey in the face. Its body skidded across the ground, and the woman stood over Hekidu's form, while the dragon boy stared, completely bewildered. He heard the bird declare that she was taking him with her. The female eagle stood tall as the monkey leader recovered from the attack, clutching its head before growing enraged by the situation. He was helped up by the other monkeys, and they watched him call out the eagle's name. He ordered the remaining monkeys to attack the woman, but she was completely unfazed by their hostility. She braced herself and kicked one monkey, stomping on another, ready to take on the rest. As it got up from the ground and readied its dagger again, it tried for a surprise attack, rushing in from behind and attempting to stab her in the back. But she was not in danger, because she wasn't fighting alone. Her male companion swooped down from the sky and slammed his foot onto the monkey's head, sending it staggering once more. As the monkey tried to recover from the blow, it saw feet approaching it, but it couldn't react in time before it was punched in the face and knocked unconscious. The eagle pair stood confidently, one of them snatching the dagger from the monkey's hand and cutting the dragon's bonds. However, there was still a monkey in the trees, trying to lunge at the female eagle. But her partner was alert and protected her from the other monkeys. Once all the ropes were cut, the female eagle called out to her companion, Misumi, and the two of them flew into the sky, carrying Hekidu. But now, the monkeys could do nothing against the three of them, as they were in the air. However, it wasn't as if Hekidu enjoyed the situation. Despite being freed from the monkeys, and he demanded to be let go, he started thrashing around in frustration, then smacked the eagle in the face with his tail, causing him to be dropped. But Hekidu realized that he couldn't fly like he usually could. Hekidu worried about what would happen when he hit the ground from this height, but the eagles quickly saved him before he could fall to his death. Meanwhile, he wondered aloud, confused as to why he couldn't fly, but the birds took him to a faraway place up in the mountains. Hekidu wondered if his inability to fly had something to do with the monkeys, but he shifted his attention to the birds, wondering if they were going to eat him. The female eagle quickly dismissed that thought, explaining that he was being taken to meet their master. His confusion made her chuckle softly, and she explained that their master was a dragon, just like Hekidu, and that she wanted to befriend and live with him. However, he didn't seem interested, which confused her, as he immediately expressed his hatred for dragons, including himself. As Hekidu stood up and leaned against the wall, he asked the pair of eagles why they served a dragon, and the female explained that the dragon had saved their lives. This only confused the young dragon boy even more, but the female insisted that her words were true and that they wouldn't be alive without the dragon's help. Hekidu just looked at her sullenly, still not believing the situation, and asked if this was truly a dragon. The female eagle gasped, demanding to know what Hekidu was implying. Hekidu explained that dragons were usually too arrogant to save or live alongside birds. And although she couldn't speak for other dragons, she believed their master was a wonderful person and that he would understand once they met, since they were the same species. And he was said to have been lonely until now. As night fell, the eagles went to sleep, leaving Hekidu alone with his own thoughts. However, he noticed a strand of hair on him that belonged to Hakude. Hekidu clutched it affectionately and felt a spark of determination. He got up and stealthily left while the birds were sleeping. It seemed the female eagle noticed Hekidu's movement, but did nothing, letting the boy attempt to climb the mountain, though he struggled to get a grip. The sun began to rise, and it seemed Misumi finally decided to alert her sister to Hekidu's disappearance. The older sister was filled with confusion and anger as they set off together to find him. Meanwhile, Hekidu believed he had gotten a good distance from the mountain range before breaking into a run. Meanwhile, the monkeys had locked Hakude in a cave, where she would sleep, clutching the bag tightly. When she woke up, she realized the thing she was holding wasn't a dragon, which confused her. She went to the cave entrance and howled in a panic, clawing at the rock. It seemed something approached the monkey guarding the cave, a cry from outside, before the rocks began to be moved away. Light from outside flooded the cave as Hakude looked up to see the familiar tiger from before. The male tiger greeted her cheerfully, but Hakude walked past without responding, ignoring him. After escaping the cave, Hakude immediately chased down the lead monkey and pushed him to the ground, demanding to know where Hekidu was. The monkey quickly admitted that Hekidu had been taken from him, and she immediately ran off. The male tiger tried to follow her, telling Hakude she should just give up, explaining that the boy was probably already eaten and that she should go with him. However, his offer was quickly rejected when Hakude turned back to look at him with a sad and disappointed expression. This immediately changed his mind, and the male tiger tried to be less insistent, pretending she was just unsure about his initial offer. But he decided he wanted to make her feel better and offered to help search for the boy. Meanwhile, a pack of wolves was chasing Hekidu, who tripped on a tree root and slid across the ground, creating an opening for a wolf to lunge at him. To the wolf's dismay, however, the dragon slapped it across the face with its tail. Still, the wolf pack surrounded the boy, planning to attack his body to avoid the reach of his tail. But no one expected an eagle to swoop down and carry Hekidu away. The wolves could only watch, confused and bewildered, before howling and barking in frustration. Meanwhile, Hekidu was carried a great distance away, and the two looked at each other in silence. Hekidu immediately insisted that he didn't want to meet this dragon, but Misumi was quick to explain. He had no intention of forcing him, which caught Hekidu completely off guard, as he had assumed they both worked for this dragon. However, Misumi admitted that he would get out of this situation if he could. Hekidu simply told him to run, but Misumi obviously couldn't do that and refused to explain why, instead kicking Hekidu down into the forest below. Just then, he noticed his sister diving down from the sky. The woman landed on a tree branch and asked if he had found the boy yet, but Misumi turned away and tried to lie, saying he hadn't found Hekidu. This angered the female eagle, as if she knew her younger brother was lying. She stepped closer, her eyes sharp, and told him not to stand in her way before trying to push past. Misumi tried to stop her, explaining that taking Hekidu back to the dragon would only serve its own agenda and might even lead to it abandoning them. The woman raised her wing threateningly, forcing Misumi to back away. She warned that she would never forgive him if he dared to betray her. After that, the female eagle followed Hekidu's trail of blood. He hadn't gone far, so she found him easily. She quickly seized him and threw him to the ground, then pinned Hekidu down with her talons poised over him. She asked why he didn't want to meet another dragon, confused by his aversion, since they were of the same kind, and the female dragon seemed so eager to meet him. Hekidu demanded the large bird get off of him, but she refused and stared down at him, seeing the resemblance between him and her master, telling him he had the same eyes as the female dragon. The female eagle pressed her feathers against the scratches on Hekidu's face, ignoring his cries and pleas for her to stop. She seemed to be in a trance, her face flushing, continuing her actions until a roar echoed from the distance. Hakude swiped her claws at the female eagle, who flew higher to evade the blow, shielding Hekidu's body with her own, as they both laid claim to Hekidu. The female eagle was about to fight Hakude when Misumi jumped in to intervene, stopping his sister's attack and explaining that they couldn't afford to fight a tiger. She was still hesitant to leave, but her brother reminded her that the full moon was approaching, and they might not make it in time for something important. With that, she decided to relent. Misumi gave Hekidu a meaningful glance before flying off with his sister. Hakude watched them go, and her demeanor suddenly changed. Her features softened as she realized that they were now safe together. The two of them nuzzled their heads together as they lay on the ground. She crept right up to his face, intimately gazing into his face, showing her affection and joy at their reunion. She crept right up to his face, intimately close, as they both savored the relief of finally being together after so much time apart. But just then, Hekidu began to wonder how she could have possibly gotten here. His attention shifted to the male tiger, who was now here and observing the unfolding scene. He calmly greeted Hekidu, only to be stared at by the boy, who asked Hakude why the tiger was here. Although the male tiger believed everything was fine now, as everyone was resting after the tense situation, Hekidu was lying on the grass. The male tiger asked Hakude to confirm if she really wasn't going to eat the boy, which made her snap and turn to glare at him. Her reaction greatly surprised the male tiger, but Hakude turned away and tried to think of something to make him understand and actually care about the situation. Finally, she explained that they would hunt together, and Hekidu would spot prey from the air while she would chase it on the ground. This made the male tiger hum softly, understanding that leaving would be for the best to keep the boy alive, given his usefulness. The male tiger chuckled and wished he could fly too. It would make hunting and traveling so much easier, and it'd be fun. The male tiger wondered if he could grow wings by eating lots of birds. Hakude began to chuckle with a gentle smile, and that reaction seemed to excite the male tiger, causing him to suddenly move closer and take her hand, hoping this might lead to something. Unfortunately, to his disappointment, Hakude slapped him across the face, leaving the male tiger bewildered with a pout on his face. Hakude growled and explained that she didn't want to be touched. The male tiger wondered if he had done something wrong to her, but Hakude didn't say if she had anything on her mind, which only confused him more. Suddenly, a dragon's tail shot up into the air as the boy sat up from his rest. Hekidu's appearance delighted Hakude, who leaned forward to nuzzle him, causing Hekidu to smirk mockingly at the male tiger. This made the male tiger jealous. Though he still wanted to show off, Hekidu immediately told Hakude that he was hungry, something she was already used to. However, this time, it wasn't due to Hekidu's laziness, but because he couldn't fly anymore. Both tigers were confused by this, but Hekidu himself had no answer for it. The male tiger recalled their earlier conversation and called the boy useless. Hekidu felt insulted by those words and turned to argue with Hakude, blaming the entire situation on her for being so quick to trust the monkeys. However, the male tiger wanted to defend her. The mention of Hakude's name confused the little dragon, and the male tiger explained that it was her name, while also introducing himself as Ogle. This made Hekidu feel jealous for not having known the white tiger's name before. Hakude was also confused by Hekidu's behavior, wondering if she wasn't allowed to tell her name to others like Ogle. This made Hekidu realize how silly that idea was, and he immediately changed the subject, dropping the matter. Afterward, the three of them ate together. Hekidu wanted Hakude to help him remove the ropes that were still tied tightly around his body. However, Ogle was confused, not understanding why the dragon boy didn't just bite through them himself. Hekidu explained that while he could bite, he couldn't reach the rope that was cinched around his neck. The group struggled with the ropes for a while because they were tied so tightly. Hekidu suggested they use their claws to cut them, and this method worked immediately. Once the ropes were removed, the boy felt much more comfortable and free. However, there was still one last rope wrapped around his tail. When Hekidu asked for this rope to be cut, Hakude immediately obliged, quickly slicing through it with her claws. Unexpectedly, as soon as the final rope was removed, Hekidu suddenly began to fly up into the sky. Ogal and Hakude watched in amazement, their expressions showing their shock as they realized that removing the final rope had restored Hekidu's ability to fly. The dragon boy was overjoyed with the situation, flying freely through the sky. Looking down with a satisfied expression, Hekidu suddenly dove down and swept Hakude up, pulling her into an intimate embrace. He told her to hold on to him, and Hakude did as he said. Right after that, the two of them started soaring into the sky, leaving Ogle stunned on the ground below. He tried to call them back, but it was useless. Hekidu paid him no mind and continued to fly higher. While flying, Hekidu noticed that Hakude seemed to be uncomfortable. He quickly shifted his body so she could sit more securely, even lie comfortably on top of him so she wouldn't have to worry about holding on so tight anymore. Hakude gazed up at the night sky with a pensive look, then down at the distant forests and lands below. As her eyes swept over Hekidu's body, she noticed the scars from when the monkeys had tried to take his heart. Finally, the two began their descent. Hakude held onto him tightly as they enjoyed the cool wind washing over them. Hekidu slowly reduced his speed and turned, gently placing Hakude down on the grass. He hovered above her, panting after the flight, and asked if she found that moment pleasant. Hakude sighed with a small smile, simply saying his name in place of an answer. Meanwhile, the full moon shone brightly in the night sky, and the two eagles seemed to be affected by its light. Misumi walked over to his sister, finding her gasping for breath, while dark marks began to spread up her neck, just as they were crawling up his own. Misumi reassured his sister that they didn't have much farther to go. He lifted her body and continued walking towards the female dragon who was waiting. When they arrived, Misumi set his sister on the ground and knelt on one knee, begging Shunsui for a bit of her blood. Shunsui let out a small, sarcastic laugh, scolding them for being so late. Misumi bowed his head and apologized. But the female dragon just replied in a weary voice that she was very hungry. Misumi tried to promise that he would go hunt immediately, but Shunsui demanded something to eat right now. With that, she wrapped her tail around Misumi's leg. The dragon girl smirked, asking if she could trade a little of her blood to keep Misumi's leg. However, Misumi explained that if he lost a leg, he wouldn't be able to hunt anymore. Hearing that, Shunsui snorted coldly, turning her face away without a hint of concern. Seeing his sister's condition, Misumi grew more desperate. He begged Shunsui for some blood, at least just enough to save his sister. However, the female dragon smirked and asked why she should give her blood away when they hadn't even brought anything back for her. Her words made Misumi look at Shunsui with a sense of helplessness. Then he looked back at his sister. His breathing became rapid and panicked. Left with no other choice, Misumi gritted his teeth and gave in, calling for Shunsui's attention once more. He offered to trade his leg for her blood. Shunsui smirked, clearly pleased. She turned towards Kokuran, Misumi's sister, who was lying on the ground, and called her name. Kokuran slowly stood up, her eyes filled with exhaustion, and whispered an apology as she approached Shunsui. Shunsui lightly bit her own finger and told Kokuran to open her mouth. The female eagle did as she was told, letting the drops of blood fall into her mouth. With one swallow, Kokuran felt her strength noticeably return. Shunsui then walked towards Misumi, who was stretching out his leg with a look of pure hesitation. As she prepared to swing her tail down with great force, everyone thought the leg would be lost. But the strike completely missed his leg, surprising everyone. Shunsui burst out laughing and confessed she was just joking. Lifting Misumi's head, she dripped her blood into his mouth, whispering teasingly as she did that the eagles were so adorable and wouldn't survive without her. Even so, Kokuran just stared coldly into the distance, his gaze seemingly directed at both Shunsui and Misumi, his expression unreadable. After recovering from the poison that had previously ravaged their bodies, the two eagles had hunted together, thereby soothing Shinsui's gnawing hunger. Kokuran wondered whether or not they should leave this place. Hekidu was with Hakude, and Shinsui asked if the tiger was female. Kokuran confirmed that she was, and Shinsui expressed confidence that Hakude wouldn't harm the young dragon. She believed that Hakude might be caring for the dragon as her own child. However, Shinsui also acknowledged that the current situation was more complicated and decided to go see for herself. A worried Kokuran warned her about the creatures that might target a dragon, saying it would be too risky to move since they'd easily be noticed. However, Shinsui reassured them, saying there was nothing to worry about since they had the protection of the eagle pair. Kokuran, with a loving gaze, agreed, saying that both eagles would put Shinsui's safety above everything else, ready to protect her no matter the danger. Meanwhile, Misumi sat at a distance, his face buried in his feathers, reflecting on when he began to learn how to improve his hunting skills, a process guided by his older sister. Kokuran and Misumi were called over by another eagle who flew down. This was their older brother, and he carried a dead baby dragon that he had found. They remembered the rumors, wondering if they were true, but knew that many animals had died after eating dragon flesh. Regardless of what they had heard, they all knew that dragon meat was incredibly delicious. Time passed, and one full moon night, they all began to feel nauseous. Their brother was bewildered by the strange wounds on his body, while his younger siblings expressed their pain. The brother started to feel the wounds spreading up his neck, but it seemed their plight had not gone unnoticed. Shinsui hovered above them, calling them fools for eating the dragon meat. The three of them were confused since they had eaten the dragon long ago. However, Shinsui explained that the dragon's poison only affects its host on the night of a full moon, and that was tonight. They started coughing up blood, and Kokuran and Misumi's brother wondered if there was any way to save them. Just then, Shinsui explained that it was possible, but she had no reason to save these birds. Shinsui chuckled and said she was very hungry, which made the eagle look at his siblings, believing he had to do something to save them. As it was his actions that led to this situation, Kokuran and Misumi's brother, though reluctantly, said his own life could be taken as long as the others were saved. Immediately, Shinsui licked her lips and moved in, biting down on the eagle in front of Kokuran and Misumi. A gasp of shock and pain echoed, muffled within the dragon's jaws, as Shinsui devoured their brother and looked down at Kokuran and Misumi, claiming them as her own, while casually greeting them. Shinsui was resting after her meal. And Misumi asked his sister if there was truly any point in living if they had to endure such abuse. However, Kokuran insisted that she believed it wasn't abuse, since the dragon had granted them her blood. Her younger brother corrected her, saying that they were just toys to the dragon. However, Kokuran had had enough of her brother's perspective and shouted at him to leave, then flew away after the argument. Misumi watched his sister fly away and sighed, telling himself that he and his sister were truly cursed. Hakude and Hekidu were resting in a warm climate, with Hekidu lying on the grass while Hakude played with the tip of his tail as if it were a cat toy. A moment later, Hakude's claws scratched Hekidu's tail, causing one of his scales to fall off. This prompted Hakude to tell Hekidu that something had fallen from his tail, causing Hekidu to jump up with a surprised yelp and ask if her claws had really done that. She wondered if there was a way to restore his scale, but Hekidu looked at the wound and said it was foolish to think something like that could be restored. Hekidu's behavior made Hakude feel terrible. With her head bowed and a sad expression, she weakly admitted it was her fault for not being careful and letting her claws scratch him. Hekidu saw her melancholy expression and started to laugh, gently scratching the spot with his own claw to show her there was nothing to worry about. The scales that fell from his body were all just old ones. Hakude felt annoyed for being tricked, but her expression quickly changed. She crawled closer and picked up the scale with a gentle look, humming softly about it. She wondered what new things she would learn about him each day. Hekidu watched as Hakude observed the scale intently, holding it up to let the sunlight shine through. Hekidu was surprised by her reaction and turned away, which made the white tiger curious. She moved closer and touched the skin where the scale had fallen off. This made Hekidu shiver and moan, telling her not to touch those places because the skin was still sensitive. After explaining, Hekidu began to fly up, leaving Hakude confused. He muttered to himself as he felt his own tail curl, complaining about the feelings he was starting to experience more clearly each day.